Let us begin. So I thought that we've been learning for quite a number of weeks, and I thought it would be a good idea to take a step back or up and think about do some review and get the big picture of where we are in the Siddur. We talked about a lot of individual meditations, and I want to try and string them together into the greater narrative of davening and the journey of the ladder of davening, which we talked about in the beginning, and I want to return to it. And since we are taking a review, I thought it might also be a good opportunity to ask you all what questions you have, or any thoughts that have come up over our course of study so far. Any clarifications or questions? Would you like to start with some questions, or should I start and then we'll, what do you think? I should start. Okay. You have any questions, Jane?
Just sometimes when rabbis talk about a prayer, they'll give the overall meaning of it, but I don't even understand specific words, and I know that each word is very significant, and I like it when it's translated.
Okay, so
I think the class is fantastic, and really, I always leave feeling optimistic and close to Hashem, and I close to you and to your family and to the congregation, and I appreciate the class very much.
Thank you. So I hear you saying that you prefer, or that you would feel you would benefit from translating the entire prayer word for word and focusing on the meaning of each word.
And also the overall meaning.
Right.
What you do plus.
Right.
Because you also give the more Kabbalistic meaning as well, the deeper meaning as well.
Okay. And what I also recognize that what I've been doing is kind of big picture, but at the same time focusing on one or two words, and sometimes we need to also we need to, by focusing on the meaning of each word, we and by doing that same prayer every day, nuances can emerge, meanings become deeper, and that's the constant work, constant spiritual work of prayer. What's that?
It's only an hour, not even. You're limited.
Right. So our time is limited, and as far as the translations themselves, we do have good translations in the Siddur. I do want to say, also speaking in general terms about praying in English, there is I think there's an ongoing kind of question about whether it's preferable to pray in English or in Hebrew. And so I'll just portray both sides. On the side of praying in English, we have the idea that if prayer is to be a meditation, if it's to be an inspiring experience, one that brings us closer to Hashem, that it's ultimately a cognitive process. And that cognitive process works better when we understand the words that we're saying. And so the more intuitive and the more intuitively and seamlessly we relate to the words, the more effective our meditation will be. And from a halachic standpoint, there is really no problem with praying in English or in the language that you understand, as long as you really understand it. There is really only one prayer which must be said in Hebrew that comes up in our daily prayers, and that is the priestly blessing. Now, even that, we don't say the priestly blessing, right? The Chazan says it, and the Kohanim, the priests, say it on when that's the right time to do that. Other than that, any prayer can be said in the language one understands. On the side of praying in Hebrew, halacha discusses this issue about whether one is permitted to pray in the language they understand. And halacha says, Jewish law says that a person can pray in any language they understand as long as they understand it. And when they pray in Hebrew, they can pray even if they don't understand the words. But in another language, if you don't understand the words, that doesn't count. And so here we have 2 points. One point is the problem of translations. We don't always understand the words in English, meaning sometimes the translation brings a word that we're not familiar with. And so saying that word without understanding its meaning doesn't count. But in Hebrew, if we don't understand the meaning, it does count. And that brings us to the other issue, which relates to praying in Hebrew, and that is that the Hebrew words, as we have shown a couple of times, have multiple layers of meaning. Even on a meaning level, they have multiple layers of meaning, and they also have holy significance to the words that are not necessarily on an intellectual level, but are on a spiritual level. And that there's a holiness that we connect to while saying the Hebrew words that we connect with in a way that's deeper than our mind. Another aspect of praying in Hebrew is that the prayers were composed in Hebrew, and therefore a lot of the beauty of the prayer can only be captured in the original Hebrew. For example, the poetry, the cadence, and the way the words punch, the way they land, that has like a visceral quality to it, don't always show up in a translation almost at all. And the same is true. Excuse me. The same is true in the translations. When you translate, you have to make a choice. Am I going to emphasize clarity, or am I going to emphasize mimicking the poetry? And again, so every time it's translated, something is lost. Just for an example, a poetic, like a classic poetic piece that we say each day in our daily prayers is on page 86 in the Art Scroll Siddur. And I'll point out, so this is 4 lines from the top of the page. And you'll notice there are letters that are bolded. And so that is that each word starts with the next letter in the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, Hey, etc. And I'll read it out loud in Hebrew so you can hear the way the prayer is designed. El Baruch Gedol De'ah Hechinu Fal Zaharei Chama. Tov Yatzar Kavod Lishmo Moros Nasan Tzivivos Uzo. Pinos Tziva'av Kedoshim. Romamei Shaddai Tamid Misaperim. Kavod Kelu Kedushaso. Right, so you hear the poetry. You see the Hebrew alphabet and the cadence. It's beautiful. My Rebbe, when we learned, I still remember this from first grade, or maybe it was second grade, when we learned this prayer in school. He said it, El Baruch Gedol De'ah Hechinu Fal Zorei Chama. Tov Yatzar Kavod Lishmo Meoros Nasan Tzivivos Uzo. Pinos Tziva'av Kedoshim. Romamei Shaddai Tamid Misaperim. Kvodelu Kedushaso. Translated, the blessed God who is great in knowledge, prepared and worked on the rays of the sun. The beneficent one fashioned honor for his name and placed luminaries all around his power. The leaders of his legions, holy ones, exalt the Almighty. Constantly relate the honor of God and his sanctity. So we have the meaning, but that whole beautiful liturgy is missing. Here I'll also point out the meaning of making a prayer according to the alphabet. When prayers are made according to the alphabet on a simple level, it's just how do you say, giving form. It's a form that we follow, okay? It's also perhaps a way to remember all the words. On a deeper level, the significance of having every letter of the alphabet there is to show that this prayer encompasses all of existence. So we go back to the idea of the language being a metaphor for all of existence, so that all of life, all of the world that we encounter can be described as language that is expressing the presence of the Almighty. Language, as we said, is symbolic and referential. That is, the words themselves don't have any meaning. They don't have any life, or in Kabbalistic language, the words themselves have no life. They refer to something. So in human language, it's an agreement. It's something that society agrees upon, that these words will mean these things, but the words don't have a life of their own. At the same time, words convey that meaning. And so the worldly existence that we encounter is it doesn't have any existence for itself. It doesn't have a life of its own. Here we're not talking about existence, we're talking about the worldly perspective, the way that we see the organization of life with separate beings, each having their own existence, right? That's a worldly perspective. So that's when we understand, however, when we understand the meaning of the words, that conveys to us the presence of the Almighty. So when we're able to make sense out of the world around us, we see behind it that there is a divine life force that is unifying all of existence and that is giving life to all of existence. So when a prayer is based on each letter of the Hebrew alphabet, including every single letter of the alphabet, it's saying that this prayer, this idea includes within it all of existence, because the Hebrew alphabet is the building blocks of language, of all of language. You organize, right? These are the elements. It's like the what do you call it in physics? Elements, right? In chemistry, these are the chemical elements of life. These are the amino acids that that together make up all of life. Even though all of life is really only one thing. The whole universe is really one organism. Another way of thinking about this, by the way, in language, is that when you don't understand a language, you don't hear words. You hear sentences or phrases, right? It's only because we understand the language that our mind differentiates individual words. And so the same is true for the human reality, the mortal perspective on life, which is that we look around and we identify separate beings, when in fact the truth is that the whole universe is one organism. That's one, or in Kabbalistic terms, we would say it's all the expression of the will of God, which is one. Yeah.
I sometimes wonder certain things, and one of them is, how does a baby who doesn't have language yet dream or encompass these thoughts without language?
Yeah.
Is it so primal and just speak feelings? Or, you know, I study child language, you know, with my linguistics studies, psycholinguistics, but I never knew anything about thought with children. You don't have babies who don't have language.
Right.
So one word utterances are taught to children. They say the sentence and then one word is expressed, like up or cup or down, or they get that. And then there's a pivot word which is used with that dominant word that they learned first, like mommy down, mommy up, mommy
Right.
cup. Okay. So then they learn how to use the word, okay, as in subject or the object. And then from there, mommy expounds, okay, on an adjective.
Right.
Or an adjective.
I think the question I heard Jane asking is, what is consciousness like without language? Yeah. Pre-language consciousness. What is that like? Yeah.
Right, before they have one.
Right.
word
Before we
utterance.
get to those utterances.
What's one word
What is consciousness like? And the truth is that,
Isn't that just one?
okay, well, the question, there is some discussion about what is the nature of language within the mind of the pre-language. What is the nature of language within the mind of the pre-language consciousness? Okay, that's one question. The second question is, I just want to address generally what we can know, which is the impact of new words on our consciousness. So that's one way, Jane, of addressing this question, because we can't know, at least I don't know that we can know what is in the mind of a baby pre-language, but we can know within ourselves, once we learn a new word, how that helps our consciousness to evolve. So one of the things that happens when we have a word for something is our mind is able to identify it more quickly. So our attention becomes more focused through the more fine definition that comes with language. When language is more granular, our attention can become more sharply focused. So an example of this was done with colors, that if people were shown a color wheel and asked to find, if I remember the experiment correctly, so a color wheel where there's a kind of different squares along the wheel that are different gradients of a color, and they were asked to identify a specific shade, or maybe the whole thing was like one shade of green and there was a square that was a very slightly different shade of green. And so if people had been shown that color and had been given a name to it, they were more quickly able to identify that color because you had to look very closely at it. But once you had a name for that color, you were able to identify it more quickly. And so that's an example of the impact that language has on consciousness. Now, at the same time, that isn't to say that we don't know it before, but we don't know that we know it. Right? So in that sense, language exists inside the brain in a way that you could say that then we can go back to the pre-language brain, and you can say that potentially there is, and the Kabbalistic writings talk about this a little bit, the idea that there is, that language is there.
The potential.
In the sense that it's revealed from within. The capacity to speak is revealed or harnessed or developed rather than introduced. Right? You're not introducing sounds or the concept of language into the mind. You're allowing it to emerge from the mind itself. This is something that's spoken about, and there is deep Kabbalistic significance to this characterization of reality. I don't know what our audiologists and linguistics in the room think about that.
I just want to clarify something.
Yeah.
So you could say that we have a program that has been put into us before birth, okay, and upon birth, right, it manifests itself by the surroundings and it emerges.
Mm-hmm.
It's taught, it's developed, but the basics for that program
Are within, or it's inherent, right? It's inherent to. Right, it's part of our essence. Yeah, it's part of our essence. Yeah.
Within us as a man.
Right. Right. Okay. So that's the first general topic that I wanted to address about praying in Hebrew or praying in English, is that I want to just identify the pros and cons of each approach, and a person has to kind of be aware of what they're doing, or not has to, but I'm encouraging us to be aware of what we're doing when we're making that choice about whether I'm going to pray in English or pray in Hebrew. And this is specifically in our case where there are a number of prayer books that transliterate all the words. So somebody could potentially be praying in Hebrew without even knowing how to read Hebrew. That's very common in our area that people do that. And I don't want to, I think in the Western mentality, we tend to write that off as complete nonsense. And I want to say, kind of give some credence to it, which is that there's something very deep that we're connecting to. We're connecting to a deep part of our soul on that pre-language language that we have within us. And on a spiritual level, we're connecting to a reality that's beyond our ability to necessarily cognitively be aware of. On the other hand, the idea of prayer is not to say words correctly in Hebrew. That isn't the whole picture of prayer. A big part of prayer is a journey, a cognitive, intellectual, and spiritual journey that we go through that helps us to see through the words into the ideas behind them, and that there's a story being told in the prayer book. So I want to just review the big picture of the story being told in the Siddur. And first you have a question, Robin, go ahead, and then we'll go to that.
Say that Dr. Noam Chomsky, who was a great linguist, okay, did experiments and said exactly what you did. When children start beginning to speak, they have absolutely no laws of language in them. When he showed them, he said, this is a word. And then he said, and here's another one. And the child was able to say, oh, 2 words. Okay, inherently, he did lots of experiments like this.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that, just what you said before, that language is an innate kind of program that people
Right.
have, and within each language, there's a certain inborn kind of.
Yeah, so it's a very mystical idea. It's a very mystical idea.
There's a lot on it.
Yeah.
There's so much on it.
So let's just take the big picture. And again, we're going to talk about the idea that the prayer is supposed to encompass the 4 worlds of existence. The prayer is a journey through the 4 worlds of existence. And remember, we're talking about the 4 worlds that are described in the Kabbalah. We're not talking about 4 places. We're talking about 4 perspectives. So all of the 4 worlds exist in the same place. Some things lend themselves to revealing more of one type of world than another, but all 4 worlds are always present. And so the lowest of the worlds is Asiya, which is action, the world of concrete things and behaviors. The world above that is Yetzira, which is the world of emotion and the world of experience. The world above that is Bria. Or I should say Asiya is action, Yetzira is formation. So that's the world of the human psyche. And by psyche, I mean the emotional experience. As opposed to Bria, which is the second to highest world. Bria is the world of creation. That's the world of intellect, or the world of understanding, world of analysis. And both of those take place in the human psyche. That Asiya takes place in the human body. Yetzira and Bria, the world of emotion and the world of analysis, both take place in the human psyche. The difference is that the world of Yetzira is the person understanding themselves and their own experience. And Bria, the world of analysis, is a person contemplating truth, the objective reality. Now in all, the Bria, the world of creation. I didn't get to the highest world yet. So all of these 3 worlds have something in common, and that is the sense of separateness from reality. Or there is me, and then there is the objective reality. In the world of Asiya, there are separate behaviors, separate objects and behaviors, and objects interacting with each other. It's a world of separateness. Then and a world in which the self is kind of identified as a thing. In the world of Yetzira, the self is identified as an experience. And then in Bria, the self is oriented towards truth, but it's still separate from the truth. It's still separate from the objective reality. And then we come to the highest world, the world of Atzilus. The word Atzilus means emanation and closeness. And in this world, more with an aleph, Eitzel, or Leha Atzil, to give rise to, or to be close with. Huh? No, Atzlus is with an aleph. Yeah. No, is it lazy? Lazy is, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on that right now. Yeah. Okay. So in the highest world, Ayin, yeah? Okay, good. Thank you. So in the highest world of Atzilus, that is the world in which we are one with God, the world of perfect unity with God, where the self is completely identified with its ultimate truth. And that is that it's a part of the universe. It's part of it's an expression of God's will. I no longer see myself as an individual trying to understand reality. Now I understand that I am the expression of the divine reality. Okay? So we have not at all touched on the world of Atzilus in any of our discussions. But I do want to, but that's the idea of prayer, is that we're going through this ladder from the body, from the experience of self as an individual, and traveling through our emotional experience, our experience of the world, and then relating to the ultimate truth of the universe, and ultimately identifying ourselves with the truth of the universe. Yeah.
the greatest rabbis, who were the most pious, and also didn't beat their wives and were good to their children and everything, you know, shalom bayit and everything good. When they reached Atzilus or close to Atzilus, it was the prayer was a means of understanding reality and seeing truth in the world. So in other words, the prayer was meaningful while they prayed because they felt close to Hashem, but they also saw certain things that existed that were higher than just what happens in life. They understood deeper meanings of certain things.
Okay.
And nowadays, they have all kinds of Kabbalah centers, you know, like when Madonna went, you know, that are sort of cosmetic, you know, happiness, or almost like S was about 30 years ago, and how you know, some kind of therapies were
Okay.
in the past. But it seems that they're just band-aids rather than really. So is that what the threats and all the anti-Semitism?
Okay, so let's
Is that
stay.
all let me just
I want to stay with your first part of your question
But
first, because
can say it?
I can focus on that. The second part I'm not going to be able to focus on today.
Can I just say it?
Mhm.
That all the anti-Semitism is what the rabbis see from their study of the Talmud and their study and the reciting the prayers, what they see that's dangerous in the world.
Okay.
Is that what the threat of anti-Semitism?
So I can't-
is really about?
I can't address the second part, but I can address the first part, and that is that when we talk about the world of Atzilus, one of the things, the difference between, again, 3 lower worlds and the world of Atzilus is, broadly speaking, when a person says, you know, there's this great scene in the movie, There's Something About Mary. You remember that movie? There's Something About Mary? One of the greatest rom-coms of all time. So Something About Mary says, he says, at the end, he says, it's not about, we never loved Mary, we just loved the way Mary made us feel. And there's something about love and feelings, inspiration, which are ultimately an experience of self. It's all about how I feel, what I experience. And those are all related to the 3 lower worlds of Asiya, Yetzira, and Bariya, the world of action, the world of formation, and the world of creation, the world of things, the world of feelings, and the world of analysis. In the world of Atzilus, where we're talking about true closeness with God and having merged with the truth and having become one with, becoming identified with reality, in that moment, there's no feeling. There may be a feeling is not the dominant experience. It isn't about experience, it's about truth. And that's the tefillah of the Amida. The Amida is in the world. It refers to the world of Atzilus. Okay, so let's just go briefly through this journey, through the journey of prayer that we're talking about, and that is, we start out in the beginning. I want to finish the thought, please. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. So we start out in the beginning with the morning blessings, talking about thank you, God, for having opened my eyes. Thank you, God, for having given me clothing. Thank you, God, for having given me the ability to walk on dry land, etc. For giving me the ability to stand upright. Right? All of these prayers are the world of Asiya. Those are that's the experience of the physicality of my existence. That's the world of things and the relationship of things with each other. The self as an item that has behaviors. And then we also talk about the korbanot, the sacrifices. The sacrifices are also activities, God-oriented activities. Then from there we go into the world of the world of Yetzira, the world of emotion, and we begin to describe the beauty of the universe. Now, beauty is not analytical. Beauty is experiential. The majesty of the universe, the overwhelming feeling we get when we experience the beauty of a sunset or the majesty of the mountains and all of that, the terror of extreme weather events, etc., etc. All of these are emotional experiences. And again, it's the world of language. So we're trying to look through that and say, this is not just a beautiful thing. This is a beautiful thing that connects me to through beauty, I connect to the presence of the divine. Then we reach all the way up to Yishtabach. And Yishtabach is still in the world of Yetzirah. And then as we get closer to the Shema, we begin to speak about the angelic world. We begin to speak about how the heavenly beings praise God. And there we are, and that's already something that's beyond our experience. And what we're saying there is that I'm trying to attune my mind to a reality that's beyond my experience. And that is that there's an order to the universe beyond that which I can comprehend. And that I am part of that order. Right? So we're beginning to identify the spiritual order of the universe. And that's hopefully the next level that we're going to go to in our study. And that's through the Shema, where we refer to God as one, right? Which is not an experience, that is a truth. Bria is the world of truth, identified, analyzed truth. So that's kind of going back to the metaphor of language. We can focus on how the words make me feel, but we could also identify and when you talk about how words make you feel, you're going to identify one word that pops for you, one word that rings just in a special way, or a word that brings up sentimental memories for you, nostalgia, or whatever it may be. But then when we're going to the Bria level, we're understanding that there is a single truth being expressed in all these words. And that's saying that God is one. And then, of course, the recognition that I am part of that truth, that I am, my individual being is part of the divine unity, that I am no less a part of the divine oneness than any other creature in the world. If I say that God is one, that means me too. And I feel a connection, and then I can identify that I'm connected with that. And that can bring an emotional experience. But the difference between the emotional experience in the world of Yetzirah, in the world of the experience of appreciation of nature, and of what it feels like to be a human in the world, and the emotional experience of God's oneness, is that in the world of Yetzirah, what's dominant is my judgment of, my perspective on the world around me. Whereas in the divine oneness, it is the divine oneness includes me. Not that I appreciate the beauty of the sunset, or even appreciate the intricacy of God's creation, or the wondrous diversity that's present in creation, right? That's made that appreciation arises from my judgment, whereas in the higher world, the emotion emerges from an all-encompassing truth, which is outside of my judgment, which is not determined by my ability to appreciate it. It isn't special because I recognize it. It's special because it's true. So that's the world of Bria. And that's essentially the Shema. At the same time, the Shema in the traditional synagogue is said sitting down, because we're still in the world of Bria, which is the world of analysis, which is still in the human consciousness. It's a intellectual experience. It requires a person to think about it. And in Jewish teaching, in Jewish practice, I should say, when we are meditating, we sit. So the Shema and the blessings before and after the Shema are meant to be meditations. They're meant to be we're supposed to be trying to enter into a certain frame of mind, and that's done sitting down. In the meditation world, also lahavdil, in the secular and even in the secular meditation world, the idea is that when you meditate, you sit in a comfortable position because you want to minimize distractions and you want to have the most, be able to focus on the thing that you're being mindful of. And also in Jewish practice, along a similar line, we say that the being connected on a Bria level requires being settled, It has to be, it's a world that requires order. And order is organized and patient, deliberate. And that is evoked also through, it's like the learning, that is facilitated better or expressed more in the sitting pose. Once we get into the Amida, we're fully identified with truth. And now it isn't my experience that matters. It's completely identifying with the divine reality, and then we stand. Standing in Jewish teaching is an expression of complete and perfect humility. Complete and perfect humility, where I am standing still with my feet together, and I am completely embodying the divine presence, meaning realizing that I am present as an expression of God's will. And so we stand still with our feet together in complete trust. Standing with feet together is a very unstable pose, right? It's the easiest to be pushed over when you're standing with your feet together, right? The best way to stand for stability is with your feet at right angles from each other, with one foot behind the other at right angle from each other, right? Perpendicular to each other. Well, feet together, feet actually together is touching, not parallel, touching. That's how we stand during the Amida. Right. So it's a very unstable pose, standing with our feet touching each other, together touching each other. So it's a sign of perfect humility, perfect devotion, and being fully connected with the presence of the divine. And that's again the world of Atzilus, the world of complete divine truth. And just to briefly touch on this, that in the Amida is where we speak about our personal requests. And we have to go into this at much greater length. We speak about our personal requests because if we're in the right frame of mind, then what happens is that we are now wanting things because we are committed to God's will, committed to expressing God's will. And so God's will is that we live and thrive in the world, and that we follow the program that's indicated for us in the Torah, through the Torah, but in the fabric of the universe, the fundamental truth of the universe, that we're living that creative energy, which is the divine will, or we're organizing ourselves according to the divine will. Right? So all of that means that we need the things. We're connecting ourselves with the whole universe, in not only in theory, in a meditation, but now in fact. And that's Atzilus, the fact of the divine reality. And so now our health becomes important, and money becomes important, Jerusalem becomes important, all of our organization as a nation becomes important. All of those things are important now because we're now implementing divine will. And again, in implementation of divine will, which is truly connected with divine will, we're no longer self, we're just fulfilling God's will. And there's that isn't a feeling. That's also why the Amida is said in a whisper, because the less self we manifest, meaning not to say that we disappear, that we sleep, but that we exist fully in coherence with, in harmony with, not even harmony is separateness, but that we exist as fully as possible to fulfill the will of God. So that's the journey of the ladder of prayer. We start with the body, we start with our separate existence, what it feels like to be me. Then we go to what it feels like to experience the world around me. Then we identify the truth in the universe around us. What is the fact of life here? What is the fact of reality? What is the divine presence in the world, and that I am part of that? And then ultimately that I am going to live out the divine plan for life.
What you generated one question, isn't it? When you are connecting through prayer to meditate, you block out all extraneous stimuli. So that would say to me that praying by yourself is more meaningful and more connected and purposeful than having more people around you.
Okay, very good point. We have to bookmark that question. The idea of praying in community, why that's important, praying in a synagogue, maybe versus praying outside, praying with music, right? These are all these, right? But I think the question of praying in community is a very powerful question, and you understand, actually now, people who ask, why aren't women counted in a minyan? Actually, the question is the opposite. The question is, why should men be praying in a minyan at all? It runs counter to the whole theme of prayer. So we have to bookmark that question for another time. All right, thanks for joining. We're now going to go pray.